Classes in Python are particularly confusing to new programmers, primarily because the difference between a class and a function isn't immediately clear. However, classes become very clear to the user once they need or they encounter situations in programming where they need to instantiate persistent objects into memory. So I'm going to hopefully develop the concept of the class through example here. So let's say that we are the IT department of a school, and we have students in the school, and we have courses that the students can take, and the students and the courses interact, and we want to track all of this. We want to track who our students are, what our courses are, and how the students take the courses. So I'm going to come over here, and I just have the students.py file, and I'm going to make a class called student. So we define classes by starting out with class, and then we name the class. And notice that unlike a traditional function, we don't have these parentheses where we could define inputs, right? That's actually done in the init function that classes typically have. This function fires every time a new instance of class student is created, right? So we could input all of our initial parameters here. So what might we know about the student every time we create a new student? Well, we might know their first name, we might know their last name, and we might know their year, right? If they're a freshman or a sophomore or so on. Now, in order to be able to access these input parameters throughout the entirety of the function and all of the references to the function, we actually need to store them within the class. So this is done by just writing the reference back to this self parameter just refers back to the class, and if that's confusing, we'll develop on that shortly. But we define them down here by storing them within the class student. So we might say self.firstName equals first name, self.lastName equals last name, and self.year equals year, right? And so all this is doing is just storing these inputs for use later. We don't only have to develop parameters here that we already know, right? We can add parameters that we don't yet know that we might want to act upon later. So what's something about a student that we might not know now, but we might want to access later? How about their grades, right? Self.grades. We're just going to make it an empty dictionary. If you have a new student, they don't yet have any grades, but they will eventually, and we're going to want to be able to access those grades and manipulate them later. Okay, so that's our student class. Let's make some courses. So I'm going to go over here to a new file, and I'm going to make class course. The difference between I'm going to try to not say class when I refer to courses, just to not confuse the Python syntax with the concept of a course, right? So we're going to define a new init function. And what's something we know about the course every time we create it? Well, we know the name of the course, right? This could be math, this could be physics, this could be history. And we're going to go ahead and store that, store the course name in the class. So the cool thing about classes is that not only do they take initial parameters, but you could also write class functions. Functions that could be used within the class or whenever you operate on the class. So if that's confusing, we're going to work with some examples. Don't worry about it right now. Just appreciate the fact that you can write specific functions for the class. So we're going to write a few different classes, a few different functions that are relevant to class course. So we're going to write a function that allows us to add students to the course. Add students. Let's actually define a student. Before we do that, let's define the student roster. we're just going to make this an empty list for now. We don't know which students are in the course. And let's define maybe the grade scale, right? How do you get an A or a B or a C in this course, right? So you can get an A, let's see, by scoring between a 93 and 100. You can get a B by scoring between, I don't know, 85 to 93. You can get a C by scoring, let's say, a 75 to an 85, and so on. I'm not going to belabor the point. Let's get back to our function here. So let's write a function that allows us, oh, there's a syntax error here. Oh, there it is. All right. Let's write a function that allows us to add a student to the class. So every class function takes parameter self. This is just a reference back to the class that we're defining. But we could also give them additional parameters, right? So if we're going to add a student, we want to know which student it is that we're adding. This is going to take a student object. Now remember, we defined the student object here, right? This is class student, and class student has first name, last name, year, and grades. So I'm going to show you how you can access class parameters outside of the class. So as I'll show you in a little bit, this student parameter is going to be a student class, right? And so we can write student dot grades dot update, and let's say we just want to give them an initial grade whenever they sign up for the course, right? And we'll say self.name equals 0. All right, now what did I just do? Well, because this is a student class, and the student class has object grades, which is an empty dictionary, I have access to that dictionary here, and I'm going to update the dictionary with the name of the course, and they're going to get an initial grade of 0. They don't have any grades yet. This is just a placeholder. And then we can add the student to the course roster. So we can say self.students, which is just a reference back to the students list up here, dot append student. So we've now stored the class student in the student roster. All right, so this is how we can track, let's say, the students that have signed up for the course. Let's make another class function. Let's say we want to get a grade. Let's say the student takes a test. We want to know if the student got an A or a B or a C relative to the course grade scale. So we can say def get grade, and we want to know the percentage that they scored, right? And we can say for grade in self.grade.keys. This is just looping through the letter grade key values here in our dictionary. The scale is just self.grade, grade scale up here, and this is grade scale grade. All right, so we're now accessing, for every letter grade, we're accessing the percentage range that defines it. We could say if scale 0 is less than or equal to, or less than percentage less than or equal to scale 1, right? We're just going to see if the grade falls between these two values. Then we're just going to return the letter grade. Okay, and let's write one more function. Let's say we want to get the roster of the students. We want to print this out in a nice way, get information about all the students with one easy function. And we could say def return student roster, right? And this takes no input arguments. This will just always return the roster properly. So let's make the roster nice. Let's just make a blank dictionary first, and we can say for s in self.students. So we're going to loop through the stored student roster up here. And we can make the roster entry look like this. We'll just stylize it. We'll say the student name is s.firstname plus space plus s.lastname. All right, so remember, when we add a student, we are taking a student object here, the student class, which is the type of input that this is. And so we are appending that student object to the roster. So now, for every student that we've added, all of these parameters are accessible to us within the students stored in this list. All right, so we're just getting the student's first name back from the stored student class here, right? And we can say student year is the student.year, and we can say the student grade, what they currently have in the course, or what they currently have, I think, for all of their courses, is just s.grades, right? These are all parameters that we're accessing from the student class here, right? Cool. So we can just update our roster dot update with the roster entry, and then we can return the roster. All right, so we're just returning all of this information for every student in our class. All right, so let's work with both of these generic classes that we've made. Let's make this very specific now. So I'm in this main.py file, and I define my classes in two different files. So I'm just going to import them into the project. So from students, which is just referencing the students.py file, import class student, and from courses, import course. All right, so we're just importing our classes here. Right. Okay. So let's make a course. We have some arbitrary objects, right? But let's say we have a new physics course, right? So let's just call it C, and we're going to use our course class. And remember, we have an init parameter here, which fires every time a new instance of the class is created. So we remember, we have an initial parameter here called name. So the name of the course is going to be physics. All right. And so now we have a brand new course that is permanently instantiated into memory. We can access the course physics now at any time programmatically. Let's make a student, right? So we're using our student class. And remember, the initial arguments that we need are first name, last name, and year. So let's say the first name is Carl, the last name Weezer, and Carl Weezer's year is sophomore. All right. So now we have a new student and a new course. So remember, in the courses class, we defined some class functions. So let's go ahead and use one of those. Let's say Carl Weezer has signed up for physics. All right, so let's use our add student function here to sign Carl Weezer up for physics. We'll say C, remember we're referring back to this instantiation of course here, dot add student. We are accessing the course's add student function. And remember, we have an initial argument that this takes, which is the student. And so we're going to use our student object here that refers back to the object we created for Carl Weezer. All right, so we've added Carl to the class. Did we actually do this properly? Like, is Carl Weezer stored in class physics? Let's print out the roster and make sure that Carl Weezer is in the class. So let's run this code here. All right, and you can see we got back a list. but we have this sort of weird response, right? There's only one object in the list, and it's an object at some memory address. This isn't what we wanted, is it? I mean, we want to know that Carl Wieser is in the class, but we know that something has been stored, but how do we know it's Carl Wieser? And so this is why we wrote that return student roster function, right? Anytime you just generically reference an instantiated class, it's just going to tell you that the object exists. It's not going to give you any detail unless you ask for it. So let's go ahead and just comment this out, and let's actually just get the roster back. Let's make sure that Carl Wieser is actually what we stored there. Let's say print c dot return student roster, which again is this class function that we made here for the courses class. And let's see if Carl is in there. And sure enough, we get back that dictionary, right? Carl Wieser is in the course. We can see his information here, and we can see that he was his grade was instantiated. Remember that when we added Carl Wieser, we gave him an initial grade of 0 because he doesn't have any grades yet. So we've done it. We've made two classes and we made them interact with each other. All right. So let's say that Carl is now in physics, and he takes a test. And let's say that Carl got a percentage of 90 on the test. So remember, we made this class function for course called getGrade, and this returns the letter grade that he got based on his percentage, and if it falls between the percentage range that we defined up here in our grade scale. Let's see. All right. So let's see if what grade we get back from Carl. Right. And we see that he got a B. A 90 is a B, and that makes sense up here, right? That's between 85 and 93. All right. So what if we wanted to store that grade now for Carl? We know what he got, but it wasn't stored in his grade his grade class up here. If we print his grades up here, let's say s dot grades. He didn't get a grade. He just has a 0 here. So to store Carl's grade, we're going to say s dot grades. And then, all right, so remember, this is a dictionary. This is a dictionary of grades. He could be in math, he could be in history, and we want to define the letter grade that he has for course physics. So we're going to say c.name equals the grade. So remember, C is the course, and the course name, which is defined up here, is physics. All right, and s.grades is a dictionary, so the course name is the key, and the grade is the stored value. So when we print s.grades now, we print Carl's grades, we will see that Carl has a B in physics now. This has been properly stored. It's remembered. It's in memory. So that's how we can interface with the class objects outside of the actual class itself. Right. So we have just one instance of student here. What if we wanted to make another one? What happens? Well, let's say there's another student who's joined the class. I won't explicitly define it as a variable here because you don't need to. Let's say add student, and the student is a new instance of the student class with initial arguments. First name, let's say his name is Sheen. His last name is Estevez, and his year, Sheen is a senior. All right, perfect. All right, and then let's loop through the roster and make sure that Sheen and Carl now both exist in physics class. Let's make sure there's two instances now of the student class, stored in the physics in the physics course. All right, so we'll say for students in c.students. Remember that c.students refers back to this list, which should store this, the student classes. We'll print the student dot first name and student dot last name. All right, so we'll run this loop, and sure enough, Carl Wieser and Sheen Estevez are both registered for the course, and we can both print out, we can print out their grades. Let's say print student dot grades. We'll run that. We didn't assign a grade for Sheen yet, so his grade is just a filler here. But both of their grades are now stored. So that is an introduction to Python classes and how they can be instantiated, how their functions and parameters can be accessed both inside and outside of the classes, how they can be made to interact with one another, how they persist in memory. And I mean, you could clearly see here, I mean, I could have written a lot more code in main.py if I had to accomplish, storing all of these students and all of these courses without having generic templates in which to do that. Classes provide a nice way to store persistent objects in memory to be accessed later. And it's really one of the beautiful things about Python is that it's just so easy to do. So that is the end of this programming tutorial, and I will see you all later.